I used to think I had the perfect life ahead of me. My fiancé was everything I ever dreamed of. Kind, respectful, ambitious. My family loved him, especially my younger sister. She was always around when he visited, offering tea, joining our conversations. I thought it was just sisterly friendliness, until a week before our wedding. That day, he stopped answering my calls. My mother came into my room with tears in her eyes, holding her phone, and said quietly, "Your sister is gone." And so is he. The world went silent. My own blood with the man I was supposed to marry. If you've ever felt betrayal from someone you love, you know that pain doesn't just break your heart, it shatters your soul. If you're listening to me now, make sure you like this video so more people can hear my story. The days after were a blur. Relatives whispered behind my back, neighbors stared when I passed. My father stopped talking much, avoiding my eyes. My mother kept saying, "We must protect the family's name." I deleted the wedding photos, returned the gold, and locked myself in my room. The shame was heavier than any heartbreak. So I disappeared. No goodbyes, no explanations. I told my parents I had found work in another city, but in truth, I just couldn't bear to see their faces, or hers. I cut all contact, deleted social media, and promised myself that one day they would regret what they did. Life wasn't easy. I started with a small job, barely enough to pay rent. I ate simple meals, counted every coin, but I was free from their shadows. Slowly, I worked my way up. I took courses in business, stayed up late studying, learned to lead. People began to respect me for my skills. That respect healed a part of me they had broken. A year later, I was in a position I never imagined, a high-ranking manager in a growing company. We were opening a new branch, and I was in charge of recruitment. One afternoon, HR handed me a list of candidates. My eyes stopped at a name I knew too well. My sister. My hands trembled, but I didn't show it. Interview day, she walked in. She looked nothing like the girl who stole my future. Thinner, pale, with tired eyes. She avoided meeting mine. I smiled politely, acting as if she were any other applicant. She told me she needed the job, that life had been hard. She didn't mention him, but I knew. He had left her. Company policy required me to hire quickly, and I had the final say. I hired her, not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to see me, every day, standing where she thought I'd never be. She became just another employee, except she had to greet me every morning, follow my instructions, and watch me succeed. I stayed polite, professional, but distant. In meetings, I often spoke about loyalty and trust. I didn't need to say her name. She knew. Weeks passed, and one day she came to my office, tears in her eyes. She confessed everything, that he had taken her savings, left her in debt, and she had nowhere else to go. She begged for forgiveness. I listened, then said, "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about consequences. You made your choice. Now, you live with it." I didn't fire her. That would be too easy. Instead, I kept her on, knowing that every day she worked under me, she'd remember the moment she threw me away. And you know what? I didn't need to shout or seek revenge in anger. My success was my revenge. She took my future, but in the end, I became hers. If you've ever been betrayed, remember, patience brings justice in ways you can't imagine. And if my story touched you, share it. Maybe it will give someone the strength to rise again. I always thought my life was finally falling into place. I was engaged to a man I believed was my soulmate. Kind, ambitious, respected. My parents adored him, especially my younger sister. She was always there when he visited, bringing tea, laughing at his jokes, offering to help him with little errands. I never suspected anything. Why would I? She was my sister. A week before the wedding, everything changed. My calls went unanswered. My messages were seen but ignored. That evening, my mother came into my room, holding her phone with trembling hands. Her eyes were red. She sat beside me and whispered, "Your sister is gone, and so is he." It felt like the walls closed in on me. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. The two people I trusted most had betrayed me together. If you've ever experienced betrayal from someone you love, you know it's a pain that doesn't just hurt, it eats away at who you are. And before I continue, I hope you'll like this story and share it because maybe someone out there needs to know they're not alone. The days after were a blur of shame and silence. My relatives didn't say much to my face, but I could hear them in the next room, their voices low, their words sharp. Neighbors would stop talking when I passed, their eyes full of pity, or was it judgment? My father barely looked at me. Once I overheard him telling my uncle, "She's lost her honor, and there's nothing we can do to bring it back." That sentence stabbed deeper than the betrayal itself. My mother tried to keep the family together. She told me we have to avoid scandal. No shouting, no public fights. People forget faster when there's no drama. But to me, it felt like we were pretending nothing happened, like my pain didn't matter as much as appearances. I deleted our wedding photos one by one, my hands shaking as each memory vanished from the screen. I returned the gold he had given me, even the necklace I once swore I'd wear forever. I stopped going out. I couldn't face the questions, the stares. My phone became my enemy. Every notification made my heart race, but it was never him. I told my parents I had found a job in another city. It was a lie. I just couldn't bear to stay where every street, every shop, every relative reminded me of what had happened. I packed my bags in the middle of the night, kissed my mother's forehead while she slept, and left. Starting over wasn't easy. I took a small job in an office, barely making enough to pay rent. I ate simple meals, lived in a tiny apartment, but I was free from their shadows. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself. I learned new skills, took evening business courses, and stayed up late studying. Each step forward was like stitching a torn piece of my soul back together. A year later, I had become a manager in a growing company. We were expanding, and I was in charge of hiring staff for a new branch. One day, HR handed me a list of candidates. My eyes froze on a name I could never forget: my sister. When she walked into the interview room, I barely recognized her. She was thinner, her clothes worn, her face tired. She couldn't meet my eyes. She told me she needed the job, that life had been hard. She didn't say his name, but she didn't need to. I already knew he had left her. I hired her. Not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to see me every day, to remember exactly what she had thrown away. She worked under me, greeted me each morning, and carried out my instructions. I remained professional, but inside, I knew this was my quiet revenge. Weeks later, she broke down in my office, crying, saying she was sorry that she had lost everything. I looked at her and said, "This isn't about forgiveness, it's about consequences." I didn't fire her. That would be too easy. No, she would work here, answering to me, living with the weight of her choices. And that's when I realized revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well, with dignity. She took my future, but in the end, I became hers. I thought my life was finally coming together. I was engaged to a man I believed was everything I could ever want: kind, ambitious, and respectful. My parents adored him. My younger sister especially. She always seemed eager to help when he visited. She'd bring tea, join in conversations, laugh at his jokes. I thought it was just innocent family warmth. 1 week before our wedding, my entire world collapsed. My calls went unanswered. My messages sat on scene without a reply. That evening, my mother entered my room slowly, her face pale, her hands shaking. She sat beside me and whispered, "Your sister is gone, and so is he." I can't describe the way my heart broke in that moment. It wasn't just my fiancé who betrayed me, it was my own blood. If you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole soul, you'll understand how that pain feels. And before I go on, please like and share this story, not for me, but for anyone who needs to know that broken hearts can heal, and justice comes in ways we never expect. The days after were torture. Relatives tried to comfort me, but I could see the pity in their eyes. Neighbors would lower their voices when I passed. My father barely looked at me. One night, I overheard him say to my uncle, "She's lost her honor, and there's nothing we can do." Those words cut deeper than the betrayal itself. My mother tried to keep peace. She kept telling me, "Don't make a scene. The less people talk, the faster they forget." But how could I forget? My sister, the one who shared my childhood secrets, had stolen the man I was going to marry. I deleted our wedding photos one by one, each quick like a knife to the heart. I returned the gold he had given me. I stopped going out entirely. Every street, every shop, every familiar face reminded me of the life I was supposed to have. One night, I made a decision. I told my parents I had found a job in another city. In reality, I just wanted to disappear, to escape the stares, the whispers, the humiliation. I packed my bags quietly, kissed my mother's forehead as she slept, and left before sunrise. The new city didn't welcome me with open arms. I started with a small, low-paying job. My apartment was tiny, my meals were simple, but for the first time in months, I could walk outside without feeling everyone's eyes on me. I worked hard, learned new skills, and little by little, I started to rebuild. I took evening courses in business, stayed up late studying, and proved myself at work. Every compliment from my boss, every new responsibility felt like a piece of my confidence coming back. A year later, I had worked my way up to a managerial position in a growing company. We were opening a new branch, and I was in charge of recruitment. One afternoon, HR handed me a stack of resumes. My heart stopped when I saw her name, my sister. When she walked in for the interview,
I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, thinner, her eyes tired. She avoided my gaze. She told me she needed the job, that things had been hard lately. She didn't mention him, but I knew. He had left her. I hired her, not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to see me every single day, standing strong in the life she thought she had destroyed. She had to greet me in the morning, follow my instructions, and watch me succeed. I stayed professional, but every now and then in meetings, I'd speak about loyalty, trust, and honor, and I'd see her flinch. Weeks later, she came into my office, crying. She said she was sorry, that she had lost everything. I looked at her and said, "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about consequences." I didn't fire her. No, she would stay, working under me, living with the memory of her choice every single day. And that's when I learned the truth. Revenge doesn't have to be loud or cruel. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well, with dignity. She took my future, but in the end, I became hers.
I used to think betrayal only happened in movies, that it was something far from my life. But when the two people I trusted most, my fiancé and my own sister, walked away together, I realized betrayal has a face, and it was staring right at me. For days, I couldn't breathe properly. My phone stayed silent, my room stayed dark. The whispers of relatives, the pitiful looks from neighbors, the quiet disappointment in my father's eyes, they became a constant reminder of my new reality. My mother kept saying, "Be patient, my daughter, time will heal." But the truth was, time wasn't healing anything. It was only deepening the wound. One night, I decided I couldn't stay. I told my parents I had found a job in another city. It was a lie, but it gave me the excuse I needed to pack my bags and leave. Before sunrise, I kissed my mother's forehead while she slept, stepped quietly out of the house, and didn't look back. The first few weeks were a shock. I rented a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a squeaky bed. I cooked simple meals, rice, lentils, tea. My first job was in a small office as an assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. Loneliness hit me hard at night. I'd lie in bed and remember our childhood, me and my sister laughing, sharing secrets. I'd remember the day my fiancé proposed, the pride in my father's eyes. Those memories hurt, but I started using that pain as fuel. I promised myself I would rise so high that their betrayal would mean nothing. One evening while scrolling through job boards, I saw an ad for evening business courses. I hesitated. The fees weren't cheap and my salary was small, but something inside me said, "This is your way forward." I signed up. The classes were intense. I learned about leadership, management, and communication. I'd finish work at 5, rush to class, then stay up past midnight reviewing notes. I stopped wasting time feeling sorry for myself. Every bit of knowledge I gained felt like a brick in the new life I was building. At work, my boss started noticing. I was taking initiative, solving problems, and helping others without being asked. Soon I was promoted. Colleagues began coming to me for advice. For the first time in a long time, I felt respected. Not for who I was related to, but for what I could do. One day, my boss called me into his office. He said, "We're opening a new branch, and I think you'd be perfect for a management position." My heart raced. It wasn't just a promotion. It was proof that I had turned my pain into something powerful. I accepted the role. My days became busy with planning, interviewing, and decision-making. I wore my best clothes, spoke with confidence, and walked into meetings like I belonged there. Each step forward was like silently telling my past, "You didn't break me." And to you, listening now, if you've ever been knocked down, if you've ever felt like life has ended, know this: it's not the end unless you choose to stay down. Like this video, share it, so maybe someone else who feels hopeless will remember that they too can rise again. I didn't know it then, but my journey was about to take a turn I never could have predicted. A twist of fate that would bring my past right back into my life. Only this time, the roles would be very, very different.
I once believed my life was on the perfect path. My fiancé was everything a girl could hope for: respectful, ambitious, and caring. My parents adored him, especially my younger sister. She was always around when he visited, offering him tea, laughing at his jokes, finding excuses to stay close. I thought it was just family warmth. I never imagined the truth. 1 week before my wedding, my world shattered. He stopped answering my calls. My messages went unread. Then my mother walked into my room, her face pale and voice trembling. She sat beside me and whispered, "Your sister is gone, and so is he." It felt like my chest was crushed. Betrayal from a fiancé is painful enough, but from my own blood? That cut deeper than anything. If you're listening now and you've ever felt that kind of betrayal, you know it leaves a scar that never truly fades. And if my story touches you, like and share it. Maybe it will reach someone who needs to hear they're not alone. The days that followed were a blur. My relatives avoided my gaze, but I could hear their whispers in the next room. Neighbors looked at me with a mixture of pity and judgment. My father barely spoke to me, and once I overheard him say to my uncle, "She's lost her honor, and there's nothing we can do." My mother kept telling me, "We must keep the family name clean. Don't make a scene." But I felt like my pain didn't matter. Only appearances did. I deleted our wedding photos, returned the gold, and locked myself in my room for days. Every corner of our home reminded me of what I had lost. I knew I couldn't heal here. So one night, I told my parents I had found a job in another city. It wasn't true. I just needed to disappear. I packed my bags quietly, kissed my mother's forehead while she slept, and left before sunrise. The new city didn't welcome me with ease. I rented a tiny apartment, cooked simple meals, and took a low-paying office job. At night, I would remember our childhood, me and my sister whispering secrets in the dark, and I'd wonder how she could betray me so easily. But I turned that pain into fuel. I enrolled in evening business courses, studied late, and started climbing the ladder at work. A year later, I was a manager in a growing company. We were opening a new branch, and I was in charge of recruitment. One afternoon, HR handed me a list of candidates. My heart stopped. There it was, my sister's name. Same last name, same face I hadn't seen since that night. The day of the interview, she walked in. She was thinner, pale, with tired eyes and worn clothes. She didn't look at me. She spoke softly, saying she needed the job. She didn't mention him, but I didn't need her to. I already knew he had left her. I could have rejected her, but I didn't. I hired her, not because I forgave her, but because I wanted her to see me every single day, standing in the life she thought she had destroyed. She greeted me each morning, followed my instructions, and sat silently in meetings where I spoke about loyalty, trust, and honor. I didn't say her name, but I saw her flinch. Weeks passed before she finally came to my office, eyes red with tears. She said she was sorry, that she had lost everything, that she needed this job to survive. I looked at her and said calmly, "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about consequences." I didn't fire her. That would have been too easy. And that was my revenge. Not shouting, not humiliating her publicly, but success. Every day she worked under me was a reminder of the choice she made. She took my future. But in the end, I became hers. So if you've ever been betrayed, remember this. Patience can turn your pain into power. And if my story gave you hope, share it. Someone out there might need the strength to rise again. I used to believe I was living a dream. My fiancé was kind, ambitious, and respected. My parents loved him, and my younger sister, well, she seemed to like him too. She was always there when he visited, bringing tea, laughing at his jokes, finding excuses to be around. I thought it was just sisterly warmth. I was wrong. 1 week before our wedding, everything collapsed. My calls went unanswered, my messages were left unseen. That evening, my mother walked into my room, pale and shaking. She sat beside me and whispered, "Your sister is gone, and so is he." It's hard to explain how betrayal from a stranger hurts, but betrayal from your own blood? It feels like your soul is being torn apart. If you've ever been through something like this, you understand. And before I go on, I hope you'll like and share this story. Not for me, but for anyone who needs to know they can survive even the deepest pain. The days after were heavy. I heard whispers from relatives behind closed doors. Neighbors looked at me with pity, or worse, judgment. My father avoided my eyes. One night, I overheard him telling an uncle, "She's lost her honor, and there's nothing we can do." My mother, desperate to keep the family's name clean, kept repeating, "Don't make a scene, let time make people forget." But I couldn't forget. I deleted our wedding photos, returned the gold, and stopped going out entirely. Every room in our home reminded me of what had been stolen from me. One night, I told my parents I'd found a job in another city. It wasn't true, I just needed to disappear. Before sunrise, I packed my bags, kissed my mother's forehead as she slept, and left. Life in the new city was hard. I rented a small apartment, cooked simple meals, and took a low-paying office job. At night, loneliness crept in. I'd remember my sister's smile, the way we once whispered secrets at night, and I'd wonder how she could throw me away so easily. But I decided I wouldn't let her betrayal define me. I enrolled in evening business courses. The fees took most of my salary, but I knew it was an investment in myself. I stayed up late studying, worked harder than ever, and slowly I began to rise. My boss noticed. I was promoted, trusted, respected, not because of my family, but because of what I could do. A year later, I became a manager in a growing company. We were opening a new branch, and I was in charge of recruitment. One afternoon, HR handed me a stack of applications. My heart stopped when I saw her name, my sister. On the day of the interview, she walked in, thinner, pale, wearing worn-out clothes. She didn't meet my eyes. I smiled politely, keeping my tone professional. She spoke softly, explaining she needed the job, that times had been hard. She didn't mention him, but I already knew he had left her, just as easily as she had left me. I had the power to reject her, but I didn't.
I hired her, not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to see me every day standing in the place she thought I'd never reach. At work, she greeted me each morning, followed my instructions, and sat silently in meetings where I spoke about loyalty and trust. I never said her name, but I could see the shame in her eyes. Weeks later, she came to my office in tears. She confessed everything, that he had taken her savings, left her in debt, and that she had nowhere else to go. She begged for forgiveness. I listened quietly, then told her, this isn't about forgiveness, it's about consequences. I didn't fire her. That would be too easy. No, she would keep her job, but every day she would remember. And that was my revenge. Not loud, not cruel, just success, dignity, and patience. She took my future, but in the end, I became hers.
I used to think love was something pure, something that could never turn into poison. My fiancé, Omar, was everything I thought I wanted, polite, ambitious, and loved by everyone in my family. Even my younger sister Selma seemed to like him. She'd always be around when he visited, offering tea, laughing at his jokes, asking him about his work. I thought it was just her being a good hostess. In our culture, family hospitality is sacred. I never imagined it could be anything else. 1 week before the wedding, Omar vanished. My calls went unanswered, my messages left on seen. That evening, my mother came into my room, her face pale, her hands trembling. She whispered, "Your sister and Omar. They're gone." My world collapsed. It wasn't just the loss of my fiancé, it was the betrayal of my own blood. If you've ever had someone tear your heart apart like that, you know it's not just pain, it's humiliation. And if this story is already making you think of someone who betrayed you, share it. Maybe it will help someone else feel less alone. The days that followed were torture. Neighbors whispered, relatives avoided eye contact. My father barely spoke to me, and my mother kept saying, "Keep your head down, don't cause a scandal." But how could I stay silent when the people I loved most had destroyed me? I returned Omar's gifts, tore up our wedding invitations, and locked myself away. One morning, I packed my bags and told my parents I'd found a job in another city. It wasn't true. I just needed to escape. Before the sun rose, I kissed my mother's forehead while she slept and walked out without looking back. The city became my place of exile and rebirth. I found a small apartment with peeling paint and a leaky sink. My first job barely paid the bills, but it kept me alive. At night, I would lie in bed, replaying their laughter in my head, wondering if they ever thought of me. But grief has a strange way of turning into fuel. I enrolled in business courses, studied after work, and refused to let my past define me. Months passed, and I climbed the ladder at my company, one promotion at a time. My boss started trusting me with major projects, and soon I was given the responsibility of opening a new branch. The day HR handed me the stack of job applications, my eyes froze. There it was, Selma's name. My hands went cold. I had heard rumors Omar had left her, but I didn't expect to see her here. The interview day came. She walked in looking nothing like the sister I remembered. Thinner, pale, her eyes carrying shame. She spoke about needing the job, about difficult times. She didn't mention Omar. She didn't need to. I already knew. Company policy was clear. We urgently needed staff, and I was the final decision maker. Inside, I wrestled with myself. I could reject her and watch her weave, defeated, but something in me wanted more than a quick victory. I wanted her to see me every single day, living the life she tried to steal. So I hired her. Not out of kindness, but because the best revenge is letting someone witness your success while they live with their regrets. For weeks, she greeted me every morning, avoided my eyes, and sat silently in meetings where I spoke about loyalty, trust, and betrayal, not by name, but with words sharp enough to cut. She flinched, but said nothing. One afternoon, she knocked on my office door, tears in her eyes. She whispered, "I'm sorry. I lost everything." I looked at her calmly and said, "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about consequences." I didn't fire her. That would have been mercy. Instead, I let her stay, working under me, reminded daily of what she had thrown away. That was my revenge. Quiet, unshakable, and in the end, she became the one who had to live in the shadow of my future. From the first day Salma joined the company, the balance between us had shifted completely. She was no longer the confident older sister who used to tell me what to do, no longer the one who had all the answers. Now, every morning, she had to knock on my office door, greet me formally, and wait for my acknowledgement before entering. "Good morning, manager," she would say, her voice careful, almost rehearsed. And every time, I would simply nod, keeping my expression calm and professional, as if she were just another employee. In our culture, we are raised to give family special warmth, a softer tone, a longer greeting. But I withheld that.
I gave her only what was necessary for work. Some days, I'd assign her small, almost trivial tasks. Salma, could you organize these files? Please make sure this data is copied by the end of the day. She never complained, but I could see the tightness in her jaw, the way her hands gripped the papers a little too hard. It wasn't the work that bothered her, it was the reminder that the authority was mine now. The other employees noticed her discomfort, but they didn't know our history. To them, she was just a quiet new hire who kept her head down. They didn't know the years of betrayal and silence between us. They didn't know this woman, who now waited for my instructions, had stolen something I could never get back: my trust. One afternoon, during a meeting, she made a small mistake in a report. Nothing major, but I corrected her in front of the team. Salma, please review this carefully before sending it next time. My tone was even, but the room went silent for a moment. In Arab culture, public correction carries weight, not humiliation exactly, but a sting that lingers. She smiled faintly, nodding, and scribbled notes, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. She remembered that I was the one learning from her. I never raised my voice, never insulted her. My revenge was quieter than that. I treated her exactly like any other employee, no more, no less. That was the real punishment. Because in our world, being treated like a stranger by your own blood cuts deeper than any harsh word. There were moments when I caught her watching me during meetings, maybe trying to read my thoughts. I would simply continue speaking, explaining strategies, giving assignments, praising the work of others. I made sure my recognition was always directed elsewhere, never toward her. One day, after finishing a project, she brought it to my office. "Here's the report you asked for," she said softly. "Thank you," I replied, flipping through it without looking up at her. The silence stretched for a moment before she turned and walked away. I could feel the heaviness in her steps as she left, and I'll be honest, a part of me wondered if I was being too cold. But then I remembered the night everything fell apart, the whispered conversations behind my back, the way she stood by Omar's side as if I didn't exist. That memory kept my resolve sharp. My friends, if you've ever been hurt by someone you love, you know what I mean. You can forgive, you can move on, but you can also choose to let them feel the consequences in a way that words never could. And if you're still listening to this story, take a second to share it. Someone out there might need to hear that it's okay to protect yourself, even from family. The days turned into weeks, and slowly the reality settled in for her. I wasn't going to break. I wasn't going to soften. She was no longer the sister who guided me. She was my employee, and that was all.
When I decided to hire Selma, people thought I was being merciful. They didn't know the truth. This was never about forgiveness. It was about letting her feel the weight of her own choices, day after day, until it settled deep inside her. From the first week, I began assigning her projects that I knew would press on her weak points. She was terrible at managing tight deadlines, so I gave her reports with impossible turnaround times. Not because I wanted her to fail, but because I wanted her to see the difference between us, that I had grown into someone strong, dependable, and respected, while she had become fragile and uncertain. In team meetings, I made it a habit to praise others in front of her. "Excellent work, Ahmed. Your attention to detail is inspiring. Sarah, your loyalty to the company is unmatched." Salma would sit there, smiling faintly, but her eyes told the truth. Each compliment to someone else was a reminder that she no longer had a place in my circle of trust. Sometimes I'd glance at her and almost feel a flicker of pity, but then I'd remember the night before my wedding, how she disappeared with Omar, and that pity would harden into stone. If you've ever been betrayed like that, you'll understand why I didn't take the easy road of forgetting. And if this story speaks to you, share it. Someone out there might need to hear they're not alone in their pain. It wasn't just the work I gave her. My revenge was in the small, almost invisible moments, in the way I dropped certain words in meetings: trust, loyalty, honor, like pebbles into a still pond. They seemed harmless to everyone else, but I could see how they rippled through her. Each time, her posture stiffened, her face paled. She knew exactly what I meant without me ever saying her name. At lunch, the team would gather and laugh, swapping stories. I'd join in, but I'd never direct a question toward her. Silence can be louder than anger, and in our culture, being ignored is a wound that cuts deep. Weeks passed like this, each one tightening the invisible net I'd woven around her. She kept her head down, working late, trying to prove something, maybe to me, maybe to herself. But no matter how much effort she put in, I never gave her the satisfaction of my approval. Then, one afternoon, she knocked on my office door. Her voice trembled when she spoke. I want you to know I'm sorry. I lost everything, and I know it's my fault." I looked at her for a long moment. The sister I had once trusted with my secrets now stood before me, reduced to a shadow of herself. "This isn't about apology, Selma.
This is about living with the consequences of what we do. She lowered her eyes, nodded, and left without another word. Some might say I should have forgiven her, that blood is thicker than water. But I believe that some betrayals carve wounds too deep to heal with words alone. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the slow, steady weight of letting her witness my success while she stood on the outside looking in. And in that quiet space between us, I found my peace.
It was late in the afternoon, and most of the office had already emptied. The soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound in my office as I finished some paperwork. I didn't notice her at first. She was standing just outside my door, hesitant, like a child about to admit to breaking something precious. "Can I talk to you?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. I looked up, and for a moment, I saw not my employee, but my sister. The same sister who once shared my room, who used to braid my hair before school. I nodded toward the chair in front of my desk. She closed the door behind her, and I could hear the faint click, sealing us into a small world of old wounds. She sat down, clutching her handbag as if it was the only thing holding her together. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling, and then the tears came. Not the polite tears people shed in public, but the kind that shake the shoulders, that make breathing uneven. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I stayed silent, letting her speak. She told me how Omar, my ex-fiancé, had found her at a vulnerable time, whispering promises, painting a future she thought was real. "He made me believe he loved me," she said, wiping her face. "He told me you never truly cared for him, that you were just using him." I believed him. And then he convinced me to invest my savings into a business he said we'd run together. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the floor. "It was a lie. All of it. The money's gone. He left me with nothing, not even dignity. I'm in debt now, and I can't—" Her voice cracked. I can't survive without this job." Hearing her admit it, the betrayal, the manipulation, it was like reopening a wound I had tried so hard to let heal. Part of me wanted to tell her it was too late, that she should have thought of this before she stood by his side. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, remembered our childhood. Remember how we'd sit on the balcony and talk about our dreams until midnight. "I'm sorry," she said again, leaning forward. "Please, forgive me. I'll do anything. Just don't take this job from me. It's all I have left." I took a deep breath. My chest felt heavy. In our culture, family ties are sacred. They are supposed to survive storms, survive mistakes. But betrayal from your own blood, that is a storm that can sink the strongest ship. I hurt you in a way that I never thought possible. Not just because of Omar, but because you chose to believe him over me. You didn't even ask me. You just judged me and left me. Her tears didn't stop. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it. But I need you now. Not as my sister, even. Just as my boss. I looked at her for a long moment. This wasn't the proud, stubborn Salma I had known. This was a woman stripped of her armor, desperate and fragile. "My forgiveness," I said slowly, "is not something you can ask for in one conversation. It's something you'll have to earn. Every single day. Through honesty, through loyalty, through respect." She nodded quickly, almost in relief, as if even this conditional acceptance was more than she'd hoped for. I leaned back in my chair. "You can keep your job. But understand, things will not go back to how they were. You are here as an employee, and that's how I will treat you. If you prove yourself, maybe one day we'll find a way back as sisters." She whispered, "Thank you." To my listeners, I'll say this. Sometimes the justice you get is not in punishing someone. It's in making them live with the weight of their actions day after day. And if you've ever been in that position, where someone who hurt you finally admits the truth, share this story. Someone out there might need to know that it's okay to protect your heart, even from family.
She sat across from me, her eyes still wet, her breathing uneven. The silence between us was heavy, the kind that makes a person shift in their seat and wonder if they should say more or if they've already said too much. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the desk. My voice was calm, too calm, maybe, when I finally spoke. "This isn't about forgiveness, Salma," I said. "This is about consequences."
Her eyes widened, as if she'd hoped for a different answer, maybe even a warm embrace that would wash away her guilt. But no, that part of me, the sister who once trusted her blindly, was gone. You see, forgiveness is a gift, but consequences, they are the price you pay for your choices. She swallowed, looking down at her hands. They were trembling, her nails bitten short. I wondered if Omar had ever seen this side of her, the side that had nothing to do with beauty or charm, but with raw vulnerability. "I'm not going to fire you," I said. I watched her shoulders relax, a faint sigh escaping her lips. "But don't think for a second that means things will be the same. You'll keep your job, yes, but you'll earn every dirham you take home, and you'll do it while answering to the person you betrayed every single day." She looked up slowly, confusion and shame battling in her eyes. "You mean—" "Yes," I interrupted. "You'll work under me directly. Every report, every task, every approval will go through me. You'll succeed only if I decide your work deserves it. And you will know, every morning when you walk into this office, that your position here is not a right. It's a mercy I chose to give you." Her lips parted as if to protest, but no words came. The reality of what I'd said settled in, and with it came the true weight of her humiliation. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "Maybe one day I'll forgive you. Maybe, but not today. Today I'm giving you something more important, the chance to live with the reminder of what you did, not to me only, but to yourself." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall felt louder than usual. Outside, life went on. The faint chatter of other employees, the ringing of a phone. But inside that room, time seemed frozen. She nodded slowly, as if accepting a sentence she knew she deserved. She said, "I understand." "No," I corrected her. "You don't. Not yet. But you will." When she finally stood up to leave, her steps were small, almost hesitant. She opened the door, and for a brief second, I caught her wiping her cheeks again before walking out. I knew the others would see her red eyes, and they'd wonder. That was part of her punishment, too. The silent whispers, the unspoken curiosity. And to you, my friends, listening to this now, I'll say this. Sometimes the sweetest justice isn't revenge. It's letting the person who wronged you carry the weight of their actions, not for a day, not for a week, but for as long as it takes for them to truly understand the damage they caused. If you've ever had someone betray you, and you chose to let them live with the consequences instead of striking back, you know exactly how powerful that feels. So, share the story with someone who needs that reminder. Let them know they don't always have to burn bridges. Sometimes keeping the bridge standing and making the other person walk across it every day is the real victory. Justice, in the end, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet sentence, lived out one day at a time. I remember sitting alone in my living room one evening, the warm light of the lamp spilling across the coffee table. Outside, the city was alive. Car horns, street vendors calling out their last offers, neighbors greeting each other at the building entrance. But inside, it was quiet, almost too quiet. I was holding a cup of mint tea, watching the steam rise and swirl like it had something to tell me. That's when it hit me, the feeling I'd been waiting for, without even realizing it. Peace. Not the kind you beg for after a fight, not the kind someone hands you like an apology. No, this was the kind you earn. She had taken so much from me, my trust, my plans, my sense of safety. At first, I wanted to tear everything down, to expose her, humiliate her, make her feel the same pain she had given me. That's what we all imagine, isn't it? That revenge comes with shouting, with burning bridges and slamming doors. But life taught me something different. Revenge, my friends, doesn't always come from loud victories. Sometimes it's quiet. It's in the way you rise above without giving the other person the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. It's in every achievement they have to watch from a distance, knowing they played a part in making you stronger without ever meaning to. I could have destroyed her reputation. I had enough truth to do it. But instead, I chose to live well, to work harder, to succeed in ways she never expected. And the beauty of it? She saw it all. Every step forward I took, she was there in the shadows, forced to witness what patience and dignity look like. People in our culture say, al-sabr mifta al-faraj. Patience is the key to relief. I used to think that was just something elders told you to keep you calm. But now, I understand. Patience doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the right thing until the wrong one fades into irrelevance. There was a day, not too long ago, when I saw her at a family gathering. She looked at me the way someone stares at a locked door they don't have the key to anymore, with regret and a little fear. She smiled, but it wasn't the same confident smile she once had. It was tight, almost forced. We spoke politely, the way strangers do when they share a table, but not a bond. And in that moment, I realized something that made me smile. She no longer had power over me.
In fact, I had something she would never have again: my self-respect, my community's trust, and a future that no amount of betrayal could steal. I thought to myself, she took my future, but in the end, I became hers. Not because I wanted to own her life, but because my success, my resilience, became the mirror she had to face every single day. That's the kind of revenge no one can escape. And to you, my dear listeners, if you've ever been hurt, betrayed, or underestimated, remember this: you don't need to shout to win. You don't need to destroy someone to prove your worth. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to live so well that the one who wronged you is forced to watch from the sidelines. So, if this story touched you, share it with someone who needs that reminder today. Subscribe if you want to hear more true stories like this, stories that prove dignity always wins in the end. And maybe, just maybe, it'll inspire someone to choose patience over rage and peace over chaos. Because in the end, justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about becoming everything they thought you couldn't be and letting them live with that truth every single day.